There is a good sex scandal waiting for Tet McMillan, because Tet means head in French, so you can fill in the rest.
Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog. We're getting into it very early this time around. 2025 fantasy football rankings by position with tiers. Yes, it's early. No, the draft hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean you haven't been doing drafts. Underdog right now has some of the mini best balls on the go. Use code Mayo at Underdog right now. Get yourself a deposit bonus of $1,000. Use Jake Ciely's rankings. Dominate your draft. Does that make about enough sense to you, Jake?
Yeah, it makes plenty of sense. Also, a happy new year, because I actually looked, and the last time you and I talked was December 26th, on video at least.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, we can text back and forth all you want. You were just in Iceland. That sounded awesome. I, too, have been to Iceland. Do you recommend people going to Iceland? Because to this day, I will tell anyone, and I was there in the middle of summer, you went in winter, so maybe the prices change, the most expensive place I've ever been.
So, yes, with the most expensive place, we filled a 3/4 tank of gas in like this Ford hatchbacky thing, and it was $78. Our cheapest meal was $40, and we don't drink. So to give you an idea, like how expensive things are, like I told everybody, we were there for 6 nights, and so 6 days because the time difference was why I say nights. $1,000 in things that you're going to do and food and things you're going to buy, just expect that. But that being said, we've now been to Puerto Rico. Xcaret was all inclusive in Cancun, which was amazing. In Iceland, I would go back to Iceland before the other two. I can't recommend it enough, but understand it's ridiculously expensive.
That it is. Did you go to Oktu Toktu, their McDonald's?
No, I did not.
Yeah,
I actually did a 30-minute podcast just for everybody, like, because a lot of people are, I asked a lot of questions before I went, and there's a lot of things just good to know before, like the roundabouts that you might get killed on if you don't know what to expect. I did that. If you want to check out the podcast, it's just 30 minutes about an Iceland trip, like what to expect and what you should do. But I did not go to Oktu. How do you say Oktu what?
Oktu Toktu.
No. We didn't catch that.
It's like the one thing that pops out in my mind. I was telling you before the show, I haven't been since my honeymoon, which is almost a decade ago now. So just stuff is like lingers in your mind about certain things. Like you don't remember every second that you did on the trip. But like Oktu Toktu is like, what the hell was that? We had to go investigate.
No, we did the black crust pizza. I joked with you before that we did the burger place that's called The Cock, and it's legitimately, I mean, they lean into it. They actually say taste the cock on their sign. So there we did that, which will obviously stick in my memory. Sky Lagoon was awesome. We actually went in a glacier. We went into the glacier, which was, I definitely recommend that experience. But we also, you'll know this, Pat, you're in Canada. I've driven a lot of tough things in my life. I have never been so, like, it was 2 hours to drive to it. It got canceled because it was 25 to 35 mile an hour winds. We actually slowed down to a stop 3 times because it was white out. Couldn't see in front of us. I have never been so tense driving before in my life because in Iceland, a road in the middle of nowhere, in a rental vehicle, and like I just don't want to end up on the side of the road. And yeah, I needed a nap. I was that tense.
Yeah, I get in Virginia Beach, you probably don't do a whole lot of snow driving like I do.
No. No, we actually got a foot of snow this year. Is the most we've seen in probably 10, 15 years, which I know is probably nothing for you.
Yeah, we get a lot more than that. But let's talk about football. That's why we're here. Let's start up with running backs. Your rankings put into tiers. Very friendly of you. Saquon Barkley, he comes in at number 1 in the rankings. Jahmyr Gibbs is number 2. Bijan at 3. Derrick Henry at 4. Christian McCaffrey. That guy, he's still alive? That is your tier 1 of running back 1 through 5. What do you make of McCaffrey here? Like, obviously you have him at number 5. Could you begrudge anyone who still wanted to take him at number 1?
No, because the reason I have him 5 is only because of the injury risk. And like Trent Williams is back. Offensive line is one of the few things that seems like it's still going to hold over from last year as they jettisoned so many players. But, still Purdy, still Ayuk as of today, still George Kittle. But the offensive line looks like it'll still be solid, especially because of Williams. And McCaffrey, we know this at this point. You made the joke, but if anybody was going to stay healthy for 16 games and be in the RB, like the RB1 conversation, it's McCaffrey. The only reason he's at 5 in this tier is because of the injury risk at this point and the risk in general. So if you wanted to take him 1, I wouldn't fault you, but I don't think you have to worry about it this year. I think most people were shocked that I had him at 5. I think most people would put him in the complete next tier and probably more towards the middle of it.
Well, after seeing some of the names in the next year, I guess it really depends on where some of these rookies end up landing. But like for example,
Right.
you have Chase Brown at number 7 in tier 2. That could be a top 5 pick. They could go out and sign someone and he ends up in like a 60% timeshare. I don't think that's going to happen, and that's not the cards we've been dealt at the moment as we're talking about this. So if you're trying to project forward, this makes a ton of sense to me. But if you gave me a 1v1 McCaffrey versus Chase Brown, even at this point in time, I'm taking Christian McCaffrey.
And I'm with you. And that's why he's not in the next tier. And that's why the next tier starts with actually Ginty, a rookie. A lot of my rookies, especially deeper at running back and wide receiver in general, are grouped together because exactly what you're talking about. Like landing spot is going to matter so much. But it's going to matter for some of these players too. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think at this point signing Chase and Higgins that they're going to turn around and invest in a running back and think about. You can look. You can look at it the other way too. Like maybe they're thinking, let's just keep that the cheapest position and never spend. And so, but point being, if they drafted somebody in the 2nd or even 3rd round with how deep this class is, then we'd have to knock down Brown. Some of the other names in this tier though, like Achane. And I know you're going to bring up names, but like I'm lower than most on him because at what point are we just going to maybe say, this is kind of who he is, which is okay. He's a fringe RB1, but those ceilings that we saw from 2 years ago is just not there. There's a lot of questions in this tier from timeshares, usage, age, mixed at the bottom of them, which McCaffrey doesn't have if healthy. That's the only question is health.
Did you give any consideration to anyone besides Barkley for number 1?
Yeah, I thought about it. I see a lot of people putting Bijan at 1 because Penix under center. Was that like, look, I'm a Penix guy in the fact that I was higher than a lot of people in the draft last year on him. I know people knocked him because of the age, and then obviously a huge knock because he went to a team that people thought he wasn't going to play for 2 years. All that being said, I think if Kirk Cousins wasn't a disappointment to Penix, I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference of still what we're dealing with the backfield. Tyler Algier is not going to go away. He's not Bijan Robinson, but he's not going to fade in existence. He's just going to continue to be involved. Maybe Bijan sees a little bit more in the passing game, but I don't know how much more you can get for what you see this offense. And with Penix at quarterback, I actually think that's the boost for Drake London. So maybe Bijan, but I think that's more of the fact that people are just trying to say, well, it doesn't happen in back-to-back years. So if not Barkley, then who?
And Barkley always still has to deal with Jalen Hurts stealing 60% of his touchdowns.
It was fine last year, though.
But
what if it's only 50% next year?
Sure, but that's also what happened last year. We see it play out. Another year, teams are more equipped. They're coming off the Super Bowl. Maybe they ease off the gas a little bit to make sure that everyone's healthy. Maybe he doesn't break out 80-yard runs or whatever it is and just dominates. Like, even if you get 80% of what Barkley did on the ground last year, that could really hamper him in overall scoring because he had so many touchdowns on big runs. That's my one case.
It's true, but I don't think that's going to much take away from it too, but like the goal line runs aren't as bad as people think they are. He still had one of the higher shares in the league. So yeah, I can see what you're saying, but there's a lot like maybe Gibbs if there was no Montgomery, but Montgomery's back, at least as of today. Maybe they shock us and he's a late offseason cut or something. But I mean, Derrick Henry, I'm just not going to put at number 1 because we know his limitations in the passing game. So if you want to take any of the 5, like if you didn't want to take Barkley as the first running back off the board, I'm not going to call you crazy. And as we've talked for the past couple of years, you and I, this is another year. I think last year was the first time in a while, but this is another year where I don't have my running back 1 as my number 1 overall anymore.
No, you have Jamar Chase at number 1 now that you got that big contract extension.
Yeah, Jamar Chase. And honestly, if you wanted to do 2 or 3 more wide receivers, I wouldn't hate you for it at this point.
No, I actually think it probably makes a bit more sense safety-wise, too, because no one's coming to take their job. Or, hey, Puka, Puka looks like he gets hurt every time he catches the ball and hits the ground. Fortunately, like he's okay most of the time. But it's not all of a sudden like, hey, Devontae Adams is there now, so Puka's never going to see a target. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. We'll talk about that when we get to receivers. But there is also a case, too. It's like, oh, yeah, Jordan Mason's still in San Francisco, right?
No.
Or did he go
Jordan
to Minnesota?
Mason got traded.
He went
that was the one of the
he went to
that was the
Minnesota.
update I had to do. Yep.
Yeah. So with Jordan Mason, so for example, so obviously Aaron Jones has to get pushed down now, right?
Yeah, I actually was already pretty low on Aaron Jones. I had him as the last of tier three. Now I do. I actually had him 2 spots above that. I moved him from 21 to 23. I'd still take him in that range. I do think Jordan Mason's a factor to be involved, but Aaron Jones with Minnesota, it wasn't like he was getting 20 plus touches every single week anyway. So I don't think it's a huge knock. And honestly, Isaac Guerrero was the big winner for me because you know how I felt about him last year when we talked a lot, and I just love the fit in that system. Now we're cleared up. Like when they gave Mason that tender, I was like, oh, well, now they gave him second round. Maybe they're going to want him out there if healthy ahead of Guerrero. Maybe my Guerrero excitement's too high. So I had both of them in like the low 50s, 60 range. But now both of them jump up into the low 30s, 40s because now they are both in situations where if something happens, they will be the clear leads.
I like McCaffrey more than Derrick Henry if I was drafting today. I'd still take McCaffrey over Henry. I'm just enamored with how much. Listen, if I'm drafting a running back in the first round, I need him to hit. And if he hits, I need him to be so good he wins the league for me. I feel like that's McCaffrey at this point in time, potentially still. I still believe in that. I don't believe that's Derrick Henry.
So you don't think, I'm asking for clarification, you don't think Derrick Henry repeats last year, or you're not enamored with the 20 points per game?
I'm not enamored with the 20 points per game. I feel like we could do better for my first round pick. He's a fine pick.
Okay.
I'd have him at number 5, but I would still gamble on the potential 25, 26, 27 point upside per game that McCaffrey brings because Derrick Henry's just a 0 in the passing game.
Yeah, so it's funny because that's why I asked you the question, is because that's one I struggled with. Like, I kind of went back and forth on that for a bit. I was like, do I really want Henry at 4? And I kind of went back and forth. So if you want I'm not going to blow my first round pick, of course, Derrick Henry can get caught in the side of the knee. Like we've seen it once before, but he's a freak of nature, which is I was never concerned about him wearing down last year. But he is safer in the injury department than Christian McCaffrey. But you definitely bring up a good point that if put it this way, tier 1, Barkley 100% peak, Gibbs 100, like all 5 of them hit their 100% peak, Christian McCaffrey would outscore Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry would be the worst of those 5.
Agreed.
So tier 2, we give you a few names on the list. We got Genty, Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, A-Chain. Who else do we got here? Bucky Irving, James Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Joe Mixon as a part of a big tier that goes from number 6 all the way down to number 15. Is Kamara just destined to be the 11th best running back every single year, basically, and not do anything else?
He is. I'm actually happy that they're back with the quarterback situation they are, and that, you just have that surety of like, look, we know Derek Carr is not going to be a top 5 quarterback, but we also know that Derek Carr is not going to be as bad as things that we saw at times last year, and he will throw to Kamara. The only thing with this one is people are like, well, what if they draft a running? Well, they just did. They just drafted Kendrick Miller, who is basically Jamal Williams, who they finally got rid of. I'm actually surprised they cut Jamal Williams because so much of his contract was dead money, but they did. They got rid of him, but they still have Miller, who's just Williams, who's not going to eat Alvin Kamara's workload because he's not Kamara. He is Jamal Williams. So, yeah, I think that he's just going to finish right around this range. Liking him to the opposite end of Derrick Henry. He's safe because of his passing game work, but like similar to Derrick Henry, if everybody hits in this tier, he's not going to finish on the top of the tier. He'll probably finish right in the middle.
Well, this was the tier that hit last year. This is where Barkley was. This is where Derrick Henry was.
Yeah.
They were 7, 8, 9, like right around that range. Like I was big on James Cook last year, so I had him in this range in my rankings. But
yeah.
So where do we mine that value from this year? Josh Jacobs was another one who was in that range and came through for you on your fantasy teams. And if you're not going to spend the money to take someone inside this top tier 1 in the first round, your second or third round pick around the wraparound is going to be one of these guys. It's hard to look at Bucky Irving and think that he's not going to smash.
So I'm a little like, that I love Bucky Irving. Anybody who's been watching the show last year.
I feel like your ranking kind of decides that you objectively do not love Bucky Irving.
It comes down to looking at the Buccaneers offense and what I hope versus like what might happen. If they leave the backfield alone, then yes, I will move Bucky Irving up. I don't believe it was Chase Edmonds. But to bring in somebody, and you're still talking about Sean Tucker being behind Rashad White, I try to read the whole thing that led to Bucky Irving last year and being on him in so many leagues is the breakout is like, look at what the team is telling you. Like they went and invested with him even after having Sean Tucker from the year before. And it said, well, maybe they don't 100% trust Rashad White, and knowing Irving's skill set, he can break out and take over in front of Rashad White. They're already, again, I don't even know if he makes the team, but they already brought in a running back piece, which is just kind of like, is that a death knell for White? Or is it that they don't want Bucky Irving to be 20 touches per game? I'm hoping it's the former and not the latter. If they don't invest in a draft pick, if they don't do anything else, I will actually move Bucky Irving up. I'd rather have Bucky Irving at this point than even Jonathan Taylor. Like I'm frustrated with Jonathan Taylor at this point. I think everybody is. But I would trust him more than that. It has to do with I'm just concerned right now.
What you just said about Jonathan Taylor probably makes him the best of all these picks, though, because he is going to just get bumped down the board. If you play for the Colts long enough, this happens to you. It's the Marvin Harrison corollary where you're just good every year, and everyone's like, yeah, I owned Marvin Harrison 7 years ago. I don't want to have him anymore. And you get like 10 to 20 picks of discount on them, probably where they should be going. And then all of a sudden, Jonathan Taylor just plays every game. It's like, oh, yeah, this guy's a top 5 running back, and he gets all the work because they don't want Anthony Richardson and or Daniel Jones to be doing too much. But Kyren, I would have Kyren as the best of this range. And people just want to find reasons to bury him. If he's not buried and he does what he does, he's number 6 on this list.
I mean, yeah, if he does what he does, I think it's the usage of Blake Corum in the later part of the season. Like, just is that going to be similar to the Buccaneers, but in a different aspect of it? Is Sean McVay going away from what Sean McVay does and possibly just saying, you know what, I do see what everybody else sees, and he is small, and he is at 25 touches a game, somehow didn't get hurt. To go back to Jonathan Taylor, that's the other thing, too. Like, every year he's been hurt now. He's turning into James Conner at this point. Like, hurt. But anyway, Kyren Williams, legitimately, I've said this before, I am surprised he hasn't been severely hurt at this point with how much his workload has been given his size and stature. It's not like he's even a bowling ball for his size. So I don't disagree with you much. I think this was kind of like a little bit of a risk assessment situation here, is that Josh Jacobs is safer. But yeah, Kyren Williams, I don't know if I could tell you he's going to play 17 games. If you want to tell me that, like, I have no problem buying in as the best of this group. I still take Ginty. Depending on where Ginty lands, okay. I'm still taking Ginty.
We've seen this happen now twice in the past few years. And with Williams, even when Corum started to get more work, still 20 touches, 19 touches, 16 touches, right. 24, 31. Like, give Corum as much as he wants, as long as you're giving him 25 touches a game. Don't really care about that. But whenever the hyped rookies that come in, this is why I don't like this ranking, is that we say Bijan and we see Gibbs as the very top end guys. They went in the same draft, right? Am I misremembering that? Yeah, they went in. But so no, they're like, oh, they're first round picks. They're high first round picks. They're going to be the bell cow. Then they get to their destination and they're just not.
No, okay, so Bijan wasn't, and Gibbs is a different scenario. Gibbs is more like Kamara than anything, so he never really was going to be a bell cow, and David Montgomery got hurt, and that changed things. But you both, with Bijan, and even Barkley before him, and to go all the way back to Ezekiel Elliott, it's not, like, you know this. We've been doing your show, long enough to know that I love rookies to a degree, but I generally don't rank a lot of rookie running backs this high. Like, if you go back to the next tier, like Omari Hampton and all the rest are much further down, because even on their best landing spot, I do think you might see somewhat of a timeshare. And it takes some time to get there, even like a Bucky Irving. But this kind of talent in this kind of situation, if they do go to a team, now, don't disagree with you, if shocker comes and the Bengals go, hey, we're taking Ginty in the first round, good luck stopping our offense, I think Chase Brown's going to be mixed in enough that, yeah, this would be a tough spot and he'll slide down. I don't think the capital of what you see for Ginty in the first round is going to warrant that for most teams, but it is a possibility. I'm assuming as of today that that's not going to happen. I'm assuming the team that he goes to, even worst case, to go back to Bijan. Bijan was still an RB1. It just, he wasn't RB 2 or 3 like people were drafting. And if you remember, we both sat on this show and I was like, I wouldn't even do that. I'm not drafting Bijan that high because that's stupid. You've taken away any potential return on investment. I think Ginty, where he is right now, even the best case scenario, is a good spot for him. I'll give you this. It could only get worse. I don't know that it gets much better than RB6.
And that's why I wouldn't take him at this pick, because I feel like you've baked in every bit of upside that he's going to have, making him number 6 at running back. Like I said, I would take Irving, Jacobs, Kyron, Jonathan Taylor. I'd have to wait and see. I'm not doing my draft today, so maybe Chase Brown if he's the only guy who's left there. Like, would I take him over James Cook? Yeah, probably, because although James Cook had a bit of an outlier year for running good with touchdowns in a weird way, that although Josh Allen stole a bunch, he didn't steal all of them, which was, a nice step in the right direction for James Cook. But he's still going through contract stuff right now. I could see him holding out.
I can see him holding out. And also, to your point about breaking good, is it kind of went complete opposite end of it, is that every time he did get the opportunity, it's almost like he scored on every single touch. Like the rate was really high if you look at purely the goal line and goal to go carries. So yeah, I think this is a fair range. Again, this is why we do tiers though, because and I'm not saying this isn't worthy discussion. It is. This is why I have them in a group, because if you said, I don't want to be the first, I don't want to break this tier and start the Ginty pick in the second round or even late first, and I don't want Chase Brown because I like these guys just as much, I agree. That's why they're in the same tier. So if you wanted to wait until the third round and see if Achane or Taylor, because people are upset, or even Mixon is still there, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Let's talk about the rookies for a second. Obviously, there's one above them all, but you have a bunch ranked when we start getting down later in the list. Number 29, 30, 31, 32. And this is especially important for people doing underdog drafts right now, because they are drafting these players, not knowing where they're going to end up. So can you give me like a 15 to 30 second quick profile of the other guys who you have ranked between like 29 and 32 overall?
So if I had a 1B, it's kind of tier, it would be Hampton. I think Hampton most years would be in the conversation of early second round, potentially sneaks into the first of the NFL draft and into a backfield where you're like, ooh, I want Hampton. He can do everything. He can do everything that Ginty does, just not quite to Ginty's level. Henderson, Johnson, and Judkins are a little bit different. Henderson, I think the injuries people started to overlook. And it seems to happen with a lot of Ohio State players, is like people get tired of them. Like we talk about Agbuka at wide receiver. It's like, I know this guy for 3 years. Garrett Wilson, I've known him forever. Like, I'm just kind of tired of him. Henderson's a good pass catcher, and people forget about that. I think that I like Henderson more as the overall running back. Judkins, I'm trying to think of a good comparison to move further up. So if we were talking about this tier, I'd put Henderson more in the Kyron Williams range and Judkins more in the Joe Mixon range, to kind of give you an idea of those two, of what you might expect. Caleb Johnson's more of a thumper. I'm concerned that people might not be, and I called him better Tyler Algier. So that should give you a good idea. He is better than Tyler Algier. Let me make that 100% clear. But that gives you a good idea of his style, where if people aren't enamored with his breakaway speed, which he doesn't really have, and kind of lump him into almost like Jordan Mason, like he could just end up being a backup to somebody. So all these, the reason that they're grouped together, which is why I brought it up earlier, is because if any of them get drafted to a team like the Browns, and it's like, oh, we're done with Jerome Ford, now Jerome Ford's back into the backup role, you'd be like, oh, cool, we might have an RB2 here. Conversely, somebody gets drafted to, I don't know, the Vikings before they signed Jordan Mason, to just give an example, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, he's behind a good running back, so maybe something happens like Bucky Irving later in the year type of situation.
Okay, and right now you can...
Henderson to Irving is actually a good comparison too. Sorry.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I know that people are doing these drafts. If you want to do an Underdog best ball draft right now, what I would recommend, if you're new to Underdog, use code Mayo at Underdog. It gives you a deposit bonus of up to $1,000, and you can use that up to $1,000 to do all your drafts, lock up that money, and then you can just play with the rest on the site. It's perfect if you want to get into these drafts. I have golf drafts, even ones like branded for me, that are up there right now, but I know that the NFL ones are still the most popular, and you're watching an NFL show, so you should probably take advantage of the bonus funds being offered, because Jake, I'm not one to be drafting in March or April, but I know people love to do it.
Oh, they'd love to. My dynasty league, my home dynasty league, I'm in a couple, but my home, they're like, can we get the draft before the draft? I was like, no, I want to know where these guys are going. I know people love to do it, but if I have money on the line, especially like Underdog, like I will sprinkle in, because you get that argument to say, like, if you're really in depth, you're watching these kind of shows and listening to this podcast, you have the knowledge that some people might not have and just go pick up later down the road. You could say, all right, everybody's drafting Hampton. Well, I'll just wait 3 rounds and draft Trevion Henderson, and then fortune behold to you, Hampton ends up in a timeshare and Henderson ends up the lead of a backfield. Like, that's the advantage of doing it right now. I'm always hesitant to do it like you are, but if you're doing it right now, this is where you get those kind of edges.
And if you feel like you do have a substantial advantage in that category, then doing the draft now does make the most sense. Plus, those drafts are going to get filled probably even by the time the drafts come anyway. So it's not like you're drafting against me, who's drafting in August in the same contest. It's just not going to happen that way.
Right.
They're going to release more and more contests. So go use code Mayo at Underdog right now. Okay? Tier 3 at your running back. There's one name I really like in here. Maybe it's because I actually have him in my longtime keeper league at a very nice price, and I didn't think it would work out this way. But at 16, you got Breece Hall, Chuba Hubbard at number 17, James Conner, Najee Harris now on the Chargers at number 19, Kenneth Walker at 20, Jalen Warren, who has the path cleared out for him in Pittsburgh at number 21, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, that's the end of the tier. Aaron Jones at 23 is the end of the tier before we get into Tyrone Tracy, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Pacheco, and all the rookies we just talked about. I think Chuba Hubbard should be a part of tier 2.
Ooh. I just did a show last week. Actually, with our good friend Michael Florio.
You do other shows? You're such a cheater, Jake.
I know, I'm cheating on you. But yeah, you didn't even know either.
I know.
I'm just finding out now.
On air. You embarrassed me on air.
We were talking about winners and losers of free agency, and I was talking about the loser being Rico Dowdle and going back into the situation behind Chuba Hubbard. And I said on that show, it's like, admittedly, you talk about a lot of stuff like, we sit here, and I say we as in the fantasy community, like, last year I wasn't in on this guy, and I wasn't on this guy. And and it's not like a ha ha ha. A lot of times it's for context, but I said, I want to make something clear is I don't always hit on everything. And I said, I was wrong about Chuba Hubbard last year. I was wrong that I was sure he was going to lose the job because Jonathan Brooks was better. And yes, I said it might not happen till November. I actually even made the Cam Akers comparison from years ago. That didn't hit till December, but it was that he's just not that good of a running back. I was wrong about Chuba Hubbard. And maybe my ranking of 17 is just, I'm not a Chuba Hubbard guy. Like, he almost seems like he gets on the field and like, if we were talking video games, he's got like a cheat boost to him. Like, it's like, I just don't see it. And maybe that's my issue, is I don't think Rico Dowdle's a severe threat. I just have concerns of, did Chuba Hubbard just hit the max, best case scenario, everything went right for him last year? Or is he really this good? And I'm still wrong. So I'm willing to admit that if you want him in the tier higher, I just might be wrong on Chuba Hubbard.
It's not even that I think that he's some sort of exceptional talent or that he'll play as well as he did a year ago. But I don't think that the volume is going to be taken away from him just because Rico Dowdle is there and he works so well in the system. They re-signed him to that big contract midway through last season. Not entirely sure why they were doing that, but they're paying him. They're not paying Dowdle anything, really. It's like between $3 and $6 million. Basically, I think he's taking the job of Miles Sanders.
And that's certainly fair, but okay, if we are going to nitpick too, like even with that workload, that offense, and if we talk quarterbacks, I'm higher than most on Bryce Young just because we talk about this every year too, is that I am going to take dart throws at potential top 6, 7 quarterbacks. I don't want QB 12. I never will want QB 12. All that being said, I still think there's a lot of risk with Bryce Young in that offense that it completely falls apart.
I tend to agree, but even when the offense sucked, Chuba Hubbard was still good.
That's fair.
Like and it's funny because the only reason that I ended up with him everywhere that I drafted was based on what you said about Brooks. Like, Brooks is better. Granted, he probably is, but he's not playing, so that's going to be a problem. And even as you mentioned, like, he might not be back till week 8, week 9, week 10. I was like, well, I could use a starting running back for 8 weeks. That sounds great to me. I'll draft this dude in round 11 and play him for 8 weeks. And then I lucked into a scenario where Brooks just didn't play and then got hurt for the rest of the year, so Hubbard kept playing. But I think he proved a lot to them last year. And like I said, he looked good.
It did. I think it comes down to, like, even at 18 right behind him, I don't think it'll ever happen at this point. But if I knew, like, I'll put it this way, the healthy James Conner games, I'd rather have James Conner. And I think that's why I put him in this tier. But again, I'm not going to fault you too much. I actually thought you were going to bring up the fact that I seem to be, at least early, one of the lowest on Breece Hall so far.
Well, Breece Hall and Jalen Warren had my attention. A lot of these guys, there's just a lot of question marks either about talent, injury, or viability. I would guess with Breece Hall, what you're looking at is they didn't re-sign him to the extension. Maybe they start using Davis. Who was the other guy that they actually used as well?
Braylon Allen.
Braylon Allen was the other one. So they used Davis and they used Allen behind him. And maybe it was the year coming back off knee injury. Everyone just thought he was going to be fine, and he wasn't. Maybe he'll be better next year. A lot like Tony Pollard a year ago, where we all invested in Pollard coming back off this injury. He was no good, and then you gave him another year to rest, and it's like, oh yeah, he is actually pretty good.
Which I could see too, but it also comes down to Justin Fields, who I think was a big winner from free agency when we talk quarterbacks. But when it comes down to Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson and all these backfields, Jaden Daniels, one running back alongside can work. One running back can finish as an RB1. Derrick Henry, even going back to your guy that you hate, was always in worst place, Mark Ingram. But what did Mark Ingram do? It was 200 touches and 15-ish, I forget the exact number, touchdowns. It might have even been 18. That's the problem. Like Breece Hall, 200 touches with Justin Fields and the Jets offense is not getting 15-plus touchdowns, and that's where I have Breece Hall down in this range.
I got to see how many times in Mark Ingram's career that he had 15 touchdowns. Let's see this. It
was that one season where he had 202 carries?
Yeah, he had 230 carries in 2017. He had 14 touchdowns. No, sorry, that's not true. He had 12 touchdowns that year. 12 touchdowns
total?
On the ground, and yeah, he had 12 touchdowns total. There was one year where he had 5 receiving touchdowns. Yeah, so he had 15 in 2019 because he had 5 receiving touchdowns.
There you go.
Which I assume is Kamara being hurt.
Probably, but I mean, the point being is like, that's what I kind of think of with Mark Ingram. But that 15 wasn't even with the Ravens, though, was it?
Ingram? No, that was the 15 was with the Ravens. You're right. Yeah, I forgot he played for the Ravens. My mind is. We've been doing this so long, like everything is mixing together in my mind. Like I don't remember the year he was on Houston.
You went straight to the Saints, which is fair.
I mean, he did play one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of his 13 seasons were with the Saints.
Sure. Yeah, you're definitely not wrong there. But yeah, that season that I was talking about, 202 carries, 10 touchdowns on 202 carries. And then, of course, like you mentioned, the 5 receiving on only 26 receptions. It's the touchdown equity, which, again, that's my biggest thing, is you're not going to get that with the Jets. As much as I am a fan of what happened with Justin Fields for him in fantasy, let's be honest, it's not the Ravens.
Could Jalen Warren be the bell cow in Pittsburgh?
He could. And this is why I have him here. This is another hesitancy one. And I know this is all drafting as of today and why I bring up like J.K. Dobbins is so low because he doesn't have a team right now. Like he's actually a loser free agency. Like nobody wanted to take it. I'm actually a little surprised. So it might sound like I'm playing both sides of the fence here, but the truth is there's uncertainty with some of these people as of today. So yes, Jalen Warren today, do I necessarily think the backfield is his? The way the Steelers have treated him and told us, and it's Arthur Smith too, is no, they don't want him to. Like they want him back, but somebody else is going to be involved. No, I don't think Cordell Patterson is going to be the one to take 40% of the work, but drafting somebody, absolutely. Waiting until after the draft and maybe signing one of the people that's still hanging out there, even a J.K. Dobbins, wouldn't shock me, and that's why. Like if Jalen Warren, this is another one, as of today, and I'm actually pretty high compared to most on Warren, if as of today, didn't have any threat, like they drafted somebody in round 6, I think I put Warren above James Conner because I would feel better about him just knowing James Conner is going to get hurt.
Yeah, I think he could even make a case that he's in the bottom end of that tier too if you knew that the job was fully his. I just think he's someone with a lot of upside that you can invest in now, and he probably moves up throughout the course of the offseason unless they sign someone big.
I agree. Well, and that's the big question too, is we still don't even know who the heck the quarterback is.
Exactly. I mean, does it matter? They just did it with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. He was good with them. Not great fantasy asset, but like he was actively efficient and good in that offense, in an offense that was not good.
I think it would depend stylistically. Like Jameis versus Russ, I think you would feel better about the wide receivers and not quite as good about for Jalen Warren. And then flip side, if Russ was just back, then to your point, and nobody else was involved, you could actually make a case Jalen Warren over Joe Mixon at this point in Joe Mixon's career, which, by the way, like let's take the biggest issue we have for this team and trade away somebody off the offensive line.
Well, maybe that's like a double-edged sword because, hey, what's the point of having a good offensive lineman if we have 4 bad ones? Let's just get value for our one good one. It's not making us worse. We're already the worst.
I mean, you never know. It might be addition by subtraction. He wasn't as good last year. There's still arguments that he's the best talent they had, but on paper, like when you go at the grading, Tunsil wasn't the best. So maybe they shock us and know more than we do. But as of today, it does not look good for C.J. Stroud, Joe Mixon, or anybody in the Texans.
Well, it could end up working out for Joe Mixon if he ends up catching more passes because there's someone in Stroud's face immediately, like last year, just like, it has to dump it off to Mixon. That's usually for our main man Dare to do, depending on the game flow situation. But it reminds me of like old school fantasy baseball when you used to play like 5x5. And like I would go into my drafts like, well, you know what? I'm not going to win ERA or WHIP. I might as well just be as bad in those as possible because I'm already going to be the worst. Who cares? I'm just going to try to stream strikeouts, saves, and wins and win 3 of the 5 categories and be the best in them every single week. It'll also be the worst in the other ones. The Texans seem to be taking that approach to their offensive line.
They're gonna he's gonna pull the Shedeur Sanders at quarterback, just dump off, dump off.
I don't know the order in which these shows come out, but I'm just after we finish recording, Thor and Ray are going to be on, and we're going to be doing our first mock draft of the year. And I'm going to get them to tell me about Sanders. Like, I don't watch college football. I don't know this. Is he actually good or is he actually bad? Like, no one can seem to agree on whether he's any good or not.
He has a potential. Here, I'll give you. This is super simple. He's tall Bryce Young.
Okay, someone said that he was like Andy Dalton to me.
No, I don't see it. I said tall Bryce Young. He has some athleticism. He's not going to run a crap ton. He can be super accurate, but the super accurate comes down into the short game, that's why a lot of people argue about him throwing to the running back so much. Could he be out of the league in 3 years? Absolutely. Could he be a top 15 quarterback in 3 years? Also, absolutely. He doesn't have as high as a ceiling as Cam Ward, though. That's the issue here, is that Shedeur Sanders' ceiling, I kind of see the Andy Dalton, but I would say his ceiling is probably Jordan Love.
Okay. That I could do. That I would draft second overall.
And that's why. But there's
problem with Sanders. No disrespect to Andy Dalton either. I know he went to the playoffs a bunch of times. He was great. But if that's your ceiling, it's like, ooh, okay. I'm not gonna win a Super Bowl with that guy.
No. But the point being is I think in Sanders' case, a lot of people view him as the Jordan Love scenario is like 20% and bombing is 80 versus like when Bryce Young went 1, it almost was like a 50-50, if not 60-40 in his favor. So I think that's why there's so much pushback on Sanders not making it even to the top half of the first round. Like he could be like, watch him slide. I still think it happens. I think if you watched him over his career, he's actually a floor at this point, like less risk than Cam Ward, but people still see a ton of risk with him.
Look, I know we got a lot of male listeners out there, and that amongst us, hair thinning, very common. It's a very frustrating problem that many men deal with, from stress to nutrition to hormones and lifestyle. So many internal factors affect what you see on the outside. Luckily, Nutrafol is here to help. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For me, it's all preventative. If I can take this now, hopefully I'm not going to have to deal with any thinning down the line. But if you want to build a hair growth routine, it's simple. Purchase online, no prescription required, automated deliveries, and free shipping to keep you on track. Plus, with a Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%. You'll have access to free naturopathic doctor consults, and a Headspace meditation membership is also included. So, start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering my listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code PATMayo. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code PATMayo. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code PATMayo. Welcome to TGL, presented by SoFi, golf's newest league. It's sharp, and it's electric. 2 hours of hammer dropping, overtime force, and playoffs on the line golf with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour. The playoffs are here Monday, March 17th. 1 seed LA versus 4 seed New York at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2 and ESPN Plus. Then Tuesday, March 18th, 2 seed The Bay against 3 seed Atlanta at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN and ESPN Plus. Tune in to catch all TGL playoff action. Keep up. It's golf. Wide receiver rankings going into the 2025 season. We already gave away number 1. It's Jamar Chase with his new, he and T. Higgins with the new deals with the Cincinnati Bengals. Jefferson at 2, Lamb, Puka, Amon-Ra. Those are the top 5. That is tier 1. Tier 2 is Neighbors, Collins, Brian Thomas, your guy. You were definitely right about him. A.J. Brown, Drake London, and Tyreek Hill. I do worry about A.J. Brown and Tyreek. It might be like the biggest rebound season of all time. They're the number 1 dudes again. It seemed like they kind of packed. I know that A.J. Brown was on the Super Bowl winning team, but it felt like they just packed it in some weeks and were like, fuck this.
So the Tyreek Hill thing is concerning more so because of Tua and that team, just in general. Like, if Tua gets hurt again, do they have...
Then you get Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson! I was once told on this show that he was Mahomesian.
Ooh, by who?
Cussed.
I know. I just wanted to So, A.J. Brown, I think, actually has less risk at this point for all intents. He was still a wide receiver 1 in points per game. It's just the injuries and time off. Like you said, is like the Eagles. It kind of goes into something we talked about last year when we were doing the power rankings. Is I kept, you remember this? I kept arguing for the Eagles number 1. It's like they don't feel like they've put 100% together all year, and yet they're still winning games. And I just feel like they're unstoppable if everything clicked. And A.J. Brown, though, to my point about why I understand your concern, is because I think that's the argument here. Is like, if Barkley just doesn't feel 100%, give him the week off. We can survive a week. A.J. Brown kind of tweaked his ankle. He would play through it in the playoffs. Give him a week off. Maybe even 2 if it's up against the bye. So I get your hesitancy. Of this tier, I think this is one where, like, look, hey, if A.J. Brown plays a full season, if Tyreek Hill plays a full season, quarterbacks stay healthy, these are kind of similar to the Christian McCaffreys. Like, I don't think they make it to the tier 1.
I mean, Tyreek Hill just did play every game, didn't he?
No, but Tua didn't.
Okay, but now you're dealing with more factors than just controlling your own health.
That's fine, but I was talking about Tua's health and A.J. Brown's health. But A.J. Brown's still dependent on Jalen Hurts' health, too.
Oh, no, you bring in the Irish assassin, Tanner McKee. He'll just chuck it up to him. I guess they have DTR now, so maybe it's DTR they want to get in there. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to be seeing who ends up with a backup job in that situation. But point being is, if similar to the conversation about Christian McCaffrey, I was bringing that in to say their ceilings are at least the top of tier 2, even pushing tier 1. So that's why they're here, because I think this is associating the risk that they bring. Like, they are better than the next group. Does the risk push them that far? If you want to argue for it, okay. I'd put them in this group because I still think the risk can knock them down, but their upside is still pushing potential top 5. We've seen A.J. Brown. We've seen Tyreek Hill as the wide receiver 1, and that's why I put him in this tier.
Next tier down, tier number 3, we got... Who do we have here? Jackson Smith and Jigba leads the tier at number 12. Higgins, McLaurin, McConkey, Godwin coming off the injury, but did re-sign for a discount, too, in Tampa Bay. Devontae Adams now with the Rams. Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Ayuk, Marvin Harrison, Cortland Sutton, Chris Olave, DK Metcalf. Don't see my main man, Juwan Jennings, inside the top 20. Where's he?
He's actually further behind because Ricky Pearsall is number 2 for me for the 49ers wide receivers.
His name is Ricky Bullets. Come on now.
Ricky Bullets?
Yeah. Come on. And Juwan Jennings might be the best fantasy receiver on the 49ers.
I don't disagree.
I'm dead serious.
Look, I know. Look, this is coming from somebody in the waiver column. Like, I wrote that last year about go get Juwan Jennings, and I'm with you. But I think at this point in year 2 of Pearsall, I think that he takes over. If put it this way, you like to argue this a lot in years and saying, like, when we have these kind of scenarios, why invest in uncertainty and take the person who's cheaper? If you want to take Jennings cheaper and he stays 2 or 3 rounds behind, then 100% on board with that. I think actually right now, do you have the underdog draft position on them? I feel like they're similar at this point. I feel like there's a toss-up right now.
I will go pull up the underdog ADP, but I did want to ask you a little bit about Jackson Smith and Jigba, because obviously DK is gone. Who's their number 2 right now? Bobo?
No. Did you miss the news?
Oh, yeah, they got Cooper Kupp.
waiting.
Is Cooper Kupp
There
really
you
going
go.
to be the number 2? Like, Cooper Kupp looked
Yeah.
pretty fucking washed, man.
He wasn't washed. He did not look like Cooper Kupp. We're also comparing Cooper Kupp to himself, which at Cooper Kupp himself was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. So a drop off from him for his version of being washed is still better than half the league. I do think this might be similar to your argument earlier too about the Breece Hall. Is like maybe being banged up all year last year and not being able to get back to 100% from the injury before that. Maybe that's a factor too. All that being said, the bigger concern is Sam Darnold with this. Like, I have Jackson Smith and Jigba here because I think Jackson Smith and Jigba, for everybody talking about the fact that they play similar roles, he and Kupp, and they play a lot of out of the slot, I do think the similar. Now, before everybody falls out of their chair, I have to make this comparison for context here. Justin Jefferson coming out of college, people are like, he can only play the slot. He's going to struggle out wide. I'm bringing that up to say I'm not calling Jackson Smith and Jigba Justin Jefferson, but he can play outside better than people might think. And I think that's a lot of people are like, oh, well, they're going to cannibalize each other. How do you have this offense? Sam Darnold's terrible throwing the slot wide receivers. He's better outside. Okay, well, that being said, if that's the truth, Smith and Jigba is going to be the beneficiary because he plays outside. I do think Cooper Kupp will be fine, but now we're talking about Cooper Kupp as a wide receiver 3. He's not even in this tier. So I'm with JSN, but as you just noted, if nobody counted while they were listening, that's 12 through 25. This is a giant ass tier where what's the difference between Terry McLaurin and a healthy Chris Olave over a full season? It might be a half a point per game. I'm drafting all the 20s and probably staying away from the top tier of this.
Olave is going to be a great value pick, potentially, but, I mean, the concussion problems really do worry me. Like, that is a continued sustaining injury that happens over time. And once people start getting the concussion tag on them, very rarely do they come out of that. They just happen more often now.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. But, I mean, to go back to last year, I'm pulling up right now, just within this tier, Terry McLaurin is 13.5, and Ladd McConkey was 12.4. So there's a full point per game, but that's also Ladd's rookie season. And this is why I have him in the same tier. Like, JSN actually scored less per game than both of them.
Yeah, but what if you did JSN from week 9 on?
Oh, that would be completely different then.
Yeah, like when he took his leave. So I guess the argument with JSN becomes, is the volume going to be worth it over, he's the man now. He doesn't have DK Metcalf to relieve him of a little bit. Like, defenses can focus, unless they go out and they sign someone else real to, like, actually draw attention away. Like, maybe Kupp is fine, but you're not double teaming 31-year-old Cooper Kupp coming off another injury in a terrible season at this point. The focus in the receiving game is going to be shutting down JSN because they don't have great options anywhere else. He's sort of on an island by himself. Can he beat that by himself? I guess is my question. We've seen it happen. Like the big Mike Evans year, 2017. He's the only dude with Jameis chucking him the ball. Jameis just kept chucking him the ball and he kept coming down with it. And then all of a sudden he's like a top 5 guy. That's on the table for JSN. I do worry about Darnold, not so much where he throws on the field. It's that the offensive line is so bad, and he sucks when he has a bad offensive line.
And you're not wrong about that. And so that's part of the concern baked in here too. And especially if it's the bad offensive line and then he throws better short and to the slot. And maybe there's a world where Kupp outscores JSN because Darnold falls apart behind that offensive line. I'll go to one thing as the counter argument that I always bring here for like a JSN is just last year, Drake London and Brian Thomas with terrible quarterback play and 130-ish, I think, range probably targets for both of them. We're both fringe wide receiver 1s in points per game, playing with terrible quarterback play, terrible offenses, and arguably nobody else to pay attention to defensively. So I wasn't even going to bring Malik Neighbors in this conversation because Malik Neighbors had an ungodly target percentage. I'm just saying, like, Jackson Smith and Jigba, even being the guy, and maybe the targets aren't as well, if he's getting 130, 140 targets, he should be okay in this range.
So right now, Juwan Jennings is being drafted at number 67 overall. That's actually ahead of Brandon Ayuk, which makes sense to me. That's what I would do. I would draft him over Brandon Ayuk.
I think a lot of people are assuming Ayuk's not on this team. I think that's what they're still waiting for that.
And Tricky Ricky is actually Ayuk's going last of the three of them. So it's Jennings at 67, Ricky Bullets at 75, and Brandon Ayuk at number 78 in these early drafts. And to note, the big $10 and the big $3 up on Underdog right now are pre-draft drafts. So you're not going to get screwed. Like everyone's going to have the same information that you have when you do these drafts. So then there'll be a whole slew of new drafts released directly after the draft once the rookies get put on teams. I just wanted to throw that out in case I didn't mention that before because I don't think that I did.
No, and when it comes to Ayuk, I think part of that might be the concern that there's conflicting reports and some stuff recently, actually. I want to say it was the past 3 weeks. It was right before I left for Iceland. There's some reports that now they're concerned that he might not be ready for week 1. So I actually understand why that ranking is. But similarly, if Ayuk is still on this team and he is ready by week 1, he's going to be the best option.
Do you know where Christian McCaffrey is being drafted right now overall?
I'm going to guess 18th.
15. It's behind Devin Achane.
Okay. Yeah, and people are scared, super scared.
But that's the whole point of this. Be scared. Take the guy. Imagine if you just done that with Barkley and Henry last year at the turn.
One of my best leagues, I did that.
I'm talking about the 2-3 turn, not the 1-2 turn.
Oh, yeah, even better. I was going to say, you know what I'm referencing because I did that at the 1-2 turn. Yeah, even better. This is where you look. I think that's the one thing that just as a complete sidebar to rankings that's really good to bring up about Underdog in these contests is you're not playing for a really good team where you make maneuvers throughout the year and stuff. Like you're playing for first place or nothing damn else. Like this is what you need to do.
Tier number 4 at receiver. This is the last one we'll do. This is 26 through 7 or 37. Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, Devonta Smith, Ramadunze from Italy. There he is. Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams, some rookie whose name seems outrageous. Terraria? The fuck is this guy?
One too many syllables. Just call McMillan. It's easy.
Well, he's not Jaden McMillan or Jalen McMillan. So they all get confused.
I know. Jalen McMillan unfortunately got buried because stupid Godwin came back. I love Godwin. I'm a McMillan guy, and I was really hoping that wasn't going to happen.
Luther Burden III sounds he might be a burden on your fantasy team, so don't draft him. Travis Hunter might not even play offense, and you have him ranked at
I know, that's
Kelvin Ridley.
I've seen him go higher than that.
Cooper Kupp is way too high. He should be like 98, not 36. And then Debo.
Why do you hate Coop?
I think he's washed, man. He's a 31-year-old dude with a substantial amount of injuries who couldn't make it work with no coverage against him and Matt Stafford as his quarterback. Okay, let's put him on a worse team with a worse line and a worse quarterback. Watch him excel.
I'm banking on health. Maybe I brought it up. This is what I would take the chance on Cooper Kupp. You're telling me there's no scenario where Cooper Kupp finishes as a top 20 wide receiver?
You would have to have that Thielen year, but score more touchdowns.
Okay.
And stay healthy. Maybe it happens.
Okay.
It feels like Thielen was able to play till he was a little bit older because he was still able to get that initial separation off the line. And he wasn't the thing that people forget about Cooper Kupp is how freak of an athlete he was before the injury when he put up those big numbers. And he was the only dude on that team that they were throwing to as well. It was a perfect combination of trailing in a bunch of games, being the only receiver who Stafford trusted, and being at the peak of his athleticism. He's had two pretty debilitating injuries from then. He's crossed 30 and he just doesn't have the same burst anymore. It's a real problem for him.
See, I agree with everything up to the burst part. I don't think the burst is necessarily as bad if you watch. I'm not gonna say if you watch. That almost sounded like you don't. Just for people out there,
for people
Cooper
out there,
Kupp
Pat doesn't watch football. Is what you're saying?
No,
I don't know.
100%, 100% does. Cooper Kupp still knows how to find space, and actually, that's why I thought your Adam Thielen comparison here was actually really good.
Well, they're both white
Adam
too.
Thielen was
being two white guys really. Older white guys who play receiver, there's 3 of them, so you can compare them all together. But my point was that they weren't the same. People would think two white receivers, bit on the shorter side. Although Kupp's not short, but Thielen's a little bit more.
They weren't.
They weren't the same at all. But now Thielen has been able to continue because his game really hasn't changed all that much. Whereas Kupp is at a different place physically that he used to be, at least in my opinion. And now he has to adapt his game, but his game was never adaptable to that anyway. So it's harder for him. It's the same reason I'm fearful of Tyreek. The moment Tyreek doesn't have the burst that he always had, he is fucking cooked.
Okay, and like, look, this is something maybe we talk about the entire season, but actually, why I said I thought that is because I thought Cup now is actually more like Thielen, and I think that he's still smart enough and good again, finding space, nowhere to go, adapting his game almost to late career Larry Fitzgerald, where he jumped inside. Now I know Cup's been there for most of his career, but you get my point. Is like adjusting their career. I think he's smart enough. And where I go to this scenario is we go back to the offensive line and Sam Darnold. Between the two of the risk, and I think this is why I kind of brought it up before, is I don't know how much JSN I'll have, even though he's my 12th wide receiver. I don't know why I put that in quotes. You get what I'm saying. Is JSN at 12, I'd rather wait and roll the dice on Cup because I do think there's a world where you brought up the offensive line. We've talked about Sam Darnold, and if anything people remember from last year, the end of the year looked like Jets Sam Darnold. And maybe there's a world where he's somewhere in between the great Kevin O'Connell Darnold and the late season one and the Jets, and like something in between. Well, there's something in between. If things go one way, there is a world where his best and most comfortable option for him, because he's Sam Darnold, is actually Cooper Kupp, and JSN ends up being the detractor here.
I would think that you have to look at it like the years that he played in Carolina, when it was just like, I'll chuck it to DJ Moore. Like, that would be best case scenario for JSN, and there was nothing left for anyone else.
I would hope. But again, that comes down to, is Sam Darnold going to fall off that much? He might just be terrible.
I think you're missing someone from your rankings, to be perfectly honest with you.
Am I?
Yeah, because all the teams on the list that you've given me are off once we get past Jalen Waddle. So it feels like there's someone at... Jacoby Myers isn't on Cleveland. Did I miss that?
No, I'm looking at it right now. It says Las Vegas. What happened?
Oh, it says Cleveland on mine. So it's Waddle, then Myers, then Shakir?
Yep. Pearsall, Pickens, Judy, Rice, Downs, Reed, Mooney, Shaheed, Pittman, Kirk, and that's tier 5.
Yeah, everyone's team got bumped down one somehow on my. I don't know. It's probably just because I opened.
Weird.
Well, you sent it to me in Excel, and I opened it in numbers because I'm on a Mac. It's probably some sort of weird formatting issue. Anyway, I was just looking at it. I was like, did these guys get traded? Like these 8 guys in a row? Rasheed Rice is on the Colts all of a sudden. When is Rasheed Rice expected to be back?
We don't know. There's so you have injury and suspension. I know people have Rasheed Rice all the way inside the top 25, even pushing the top 20. Until I get word that he's not getting suspended, I'm just why? That's why I have Xavier Worthy as high as I do, because maybe it doesn't happen until late in the season. Maybe it's only 2 games, shockingly. Then this is way too low. But if I'm drafting right now, I guess you can make the counter argument like what we were saying before. Rice is where you could win your league but he's not going at that discount. That's what I don't get. Why is nobody acknowledging the injury and suspension? This is where I would be willing to roll the dice on him, is in this range. I don't think rolling the dice on him inside the top 25 makes sense.
Currently being drafted in the early drafts at wide receiver 26, to your point, 47 overall.
Yeah.
So you are not getting that discount whatsoever on him. Last receiver I wanted to talk about was Debo. Talk about another guy who kind of seems washed, but his price is a bit more attractive than some of the other guys that we talked about. I just don't know how he fits into this Washington team. I think it's a great gamble by Washington for real life. I don't know what this means for fantasy. I think that Shanahan was able to use Debo in the best way possible, and even he couldn't figure it out last year.
And I will say, I don't.
Debo's had one good fantasy year ever.
He's had one great fantasy season. He's had a couple good ones, and I think that's the thing. That Debo from that one season, that was never going to be a thing again. Let alone that's just not who he is now. But this is why he's at 37. Honestly, if we come around and what the problem is with rankings, and this is why we talk context here. Debo Samuel's a 5 and wide receiver 4. But is he anything more than that? Probably not really. Even in this offense. The one good thing is he's going to absorb all those extraneous targets from Diami Brown to, and I'm not saying Zacchaeus and Luke McCaffrey, even as his rookie season. I know he's not going to get the Diami Brown targets, but I bring that up to say that's why I actually didn't downgrade Terry McLaurin, because I think his downfield opportunities might even get lifted, as in they might be fewer, but they might be more effective because you have somebody drawing that attention. Debo's better than the group of number 2 options than they had last year. Does that mean he's better than this spot? No. If you wanted to argue, I'm done with Waddle, and just to run through those names, if you wanted to roll the dice on Pickens and maybe they have a quarterback that surprises us and take him over him, okay. If you want to play Josh Downs and say all of a sudden it's Daniel Jones for the, I can't even say that sentence. Daniel Jones for the entire season. Okay, fine. Maybe Jaden Reed gets used like he did in the first half of last year, first month really. Fine. But I think to your point here, Debo's peak is probably wide receiver 30.
Yeah, which is why I wouldn't take him here. I have no need for him on my team.
And that's fair.
I'd rather
usually
gamble
around this range.
I'd rather gamble on the guys you talked about in case it's their year and they go crazy. We've seen that year from Debo already. It ain't happening again.
Sure, which is why he's there with these rookies actually directly in front of him. And I say usually what my style of drafting is I don't end up with a lot of these late 30s, early 40s wide receivers because this is usually where I'm looking at my third running back or maybe a tight end that fell.
Tight ends, let's briefly go over them. You have Bowers at number 1. I don't think that's very controversial. McBride at 2. Kittle, and that is tier 1 of tight end. Then tier 2 is Andrews, Laporta, Hawkinson, Jonnu Vision, Travis Kelce, David Njoku at number 9, Evan Ingram now on Denver at number 10, Tucker Kraft at number 11, and then just a bunch of guys. Kincaid, Tyler Warren as a free agent.
2 rookies.
Yeah, 2 rookies, Goddard, Kmet, Jatavion Sanders. I could see Sanders taking a leap this year, honestly. Like, if that offense starts to click, being such a highly touted prospect last year, we got kind of blessed in a weird way between Bowers, and as much as, like, Kyle Pitts has sucked over the years in his rookie year, like, where he was being drafted, he was good. He was good right away versus the old context that we used to think about, just never draft a rookie tight end because they don't do anything their first year. That maybe Sanders is actually on that plan. Maybe in year 2, he can actually just play more.
So he actually is very similar to Trey McBride's rookie season and some stylistic comparisons too. So that's why I have Jatavion Sanders this high. And honestly, if you want to throw a bullet in this range, if the Bears don't do anything with any significant wide receiver additions, I could see Cole Kmet now being the third option and not the fourth. But Sanders, I could see the higher ceiling for Sanders, honestly.
I can too. Or he could score like 3 points again.
No, of course. I mean, in 2 games.
Hey,
of course, the entire season.
He's your last round pick. Who cares? In best ball, it'll be a little bit different. You need to have another good tight end, a more safe tight end to go along with him. I don't really have any nitpicks of tight end. Like Bowers and McBride would be my 1-2, and that would be my tier. I drop Kittle a little bit more below. I understand that Debo's not there anymore, but you got Juwan Jennings, who's the number 1 receiver, so we can't do that much.
Yeah, but he had the games with Juwan Jennings, and George Kittle was going nuclear in those games because it was just
but this year, Juwan Jennings is the number 1 overall wide receiver, Jake, not just on San Francisco of the league. So he's going to have bigger stats than Jamar Chase. There's only so much to go around in San Francisco.
Fair enough.
Other than that, like it's those 2. Then it'd be Kittle by himself, and then roll some dice on people.
Just wait.
Yeah,
maybe
Ingram in Denver, maybe.
In the Joker role, as he's embraced with this GIF, sure, but here's my concern about Ingram, is that Ingram needs to see an uptick, which can happen with Sean Payton, in the touchdown department to offset what is likely a drop in his targets, because his best season came with 130 targets, and I don't think he's getting 130 targets with Bo Nix and the Broncos. So if he's only getting 100 to 110 max, the touchdowns are going to have to come up because he's very short area. You know this. He's always been he's been better in half and full point PPR than he has been in non.
Oh, 100%. But what about someone like Brenton Strange then, who's going to absorb all of those Ingram reps? We even saw that when Ingram was injured last year. Why isn't he number 11?
I mean, I have him at 20, there in the mix with Sanders, Freiermuth, and Ferguson. I would take him over Ferguson. I would take him over Gesicki and Higbee and Henry. You didn't even bring up Kyle Pitts because you had to get all the way down to 26 to get to him. That's my way of saying that's my version of your worst plays, Pat, that do not draft Kyle Pitts.
I actually like Strange, though. I think Strange, I don't know where he's going at tight end. I mean, that's something that I can effort. Unfortunately, I closed that tab.
Probably way behind that.
I would guess so, unless people are kind of savvy. I actually like him a lot. I'd probably have him as a top 12 guy, as a tight end 1.
I think it'll depend on, as long as they don't draft the wide receiver in the first round. Just the first round, which I don't think they will.
Where is Brent? Brenton Strange is going as tight end 24, pick 185. I think that's a good pick in these drafts.
That's a great pick. I'd take him well before that.
Just fire up your.
They might take McMillan.
I don't care if they get another receiver. That doesn't really bother me.
I do. If
He's
they
always
draft one
going
in the
to
first
be out
round.
there. He's always. Why are they
I know.
drafting another receiver this high?
Just because their number 2 right now is Diami Brown or Parker Washington. That's why.
I suppose that's a pretty compelling case. Yes, maybe you were correct on that. Quarterbacks, very briefly before we get out of here, you have, I assume, Hurts or Lamar, Daniels, Josh Allen, Hurts. That's tier number 1. Burrow by himself is tier number 2. Then you're into Baker, Bo, Mahomes, Purdy, Fields, Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, and then it's the rest of the league. How good do you think J.J. McCarthy's going to be?
I'm not a big JJ McCarthy fan. I know you can bring that up with Thor, and you have to.
I know Thor's take on JJ McCarthy. It's that he's a Hall of Famer.
So McCarthy's upside, I actually think, is somewhat like Kyler Murray. He's not that much of a rusher to that level, but I think stylistically, passer-wise, you can see some of that. 17, I have him there. Purely if they don't bring somebody in, they don't do the Rodgers thing or somebody else. He is the day 1 starter, and he's playing for Kevin O'Connell. I think you put McCarthy on 20 other teams, and I don't want anything to do with him. In real life, I have legitimate concerns, but fantasy is a different game, and I think for what he can do with the weapons he has, look at just what happened with Sam Darnold, and a bit of rushing upside, I think that's why I would take McCarthy over now Sam Darnold with the Seahawks or other pure. Like at this point, CJ Stroud, that's one of the things. Like CJ Stroud's a pocket passer. Like I know a lot of people were thinking he might run a little bit more coming out of college, but he's a pocket passer. And when you don't give him protection, guess what happens to pocket passers? It completely falls apart. So I have McCarthy in front of him too, but I can't put him any higher than all the rest. Like Richardson is purely off his rushing upside. That's a major risk, but I'd still take him as a fringe QB1. Fields, obvious. Fields for his starter, basically since 2022 as a starter, he's barely behind Joe Burrow in points per game.
I can see that. I mean, these rushing stats count. That's why I'm shocked you have Drake May so low.
He has no weapons. I don't know what the Patriots are doing to this guy. This is like old Aaron Rodgers with the Packers. It's like everybody sat there and said, go dress the position of free agency. And they just sat there and did absolutely nothing. Drake May is fine. He's got a big arm. He's going to be aggressive. But right now, Drake May is Justin Herbert without any weapons. His number 1 is who looks like a bust right now in Jalen Polk, Kayshon Boutte, or Baker. This dude has nobody.
Then he can run 30 times. He just run the Tim Tebow offense, who was a great fantasy quarterback.
I think Drake May's peak is probably in the 500-ish, 600 maybe range. Maybe Daniel Jones. Maybe he gets to 707. And then he doesn't even have to be a decent passer. He can finish as a fringe QB1 because that happened that one year.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty in lockstep with you in the top, though. Baker at 6. I mean, I know how good he's been. He has the most touchdown. I believe he has the most touchdown passes of any quarterback the past 2 years, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess where you're about to go with this is I'm not going to take Baker. I'll probably have 0 Baker. I had a decent chunk last year, but he's at the top of this tier because when you're nitpicking against these guys, like I would take, if given the choice, I would take Baker over everybody as a toss-up. But once we get to tier 3, talk to me at the end of the draft, and I'm going to take whatever guy or 2 is left.
Is Dak going to be ready for day 1?
That's another one. Like Ayuk. Sounds like it's a possibility. It's been a little bit more cloudy over the last month, but you and I, and doing this show probably again post NFL draft, come May, probably have a better idea at that point.
All right. Well, that's quarterbacks. We'll figure that out. The least consequential position. If you either take a good one or you wait. There's the strategy at quarterback. Those best ball drafts are being run on Underdog, the pre-draft ones right now. Code Mayo will get you a deposit of up to $1,000 at that. Jake, where can people find your rankings right now?
Over at The Athletic. Tweeted out, and The Athletic for a while.
Yes.
I did not hit free agency like everybody else.
Congratulations. I am with Underdog now as well. I re-upped with them. You re-upped with The Athletic. I re-upped with Underdog. So at least they like the work that we're doing. It's nice to get re-upped.
That's all that matters. We got our contract extensions before we hit the free agency. So congratulations to you as well. That was good news to see over text.
Oh, so I can just call this guy Tet McMillan?
Yeah. There you go.
Can't wait for people to call him the Tet Offensive. when he starts like scoring touchdowns, and then people have to like Google what the Tet offensive is. And they're like, I didn't even know this happened during the Vietnam War. That's something that's going to happen.
That's where you're going with this? I'll give you one. Get ready for people not knowing whether to call him Travion Henderson or Trey Henderson, because at the Combine, he had Trey on his name thing, which is the first time he's like ever done that. So we already have one where we're not sure what to call him yet.
I mean, there is a good sex scandal waiting for Tet McMillan, because Tet means head in French, so you can fill in the rest.
Thank you for that party note.
No problem. I'm helping New York Post writers get out ahead of their headlines, okay?
Thank you. I'll make sure that's included in one of mine.
You pass that on to the athletic staff, we'll be good to go. You can follow Jake on X at AllenKid. You can follow me at the PME. All right, smash a like and sub to the channel while you're here, and I will see you next time.
That Mayo experience. Experience.